that that's quite the explanation. So originally the idea came when I was exploring the different ways that people were really attempting to express themselves in the most unadulterated way online. And for me personally, it's been through being like very public and sharing my creative process and how I, am as a person. But for other people, they have a few social hangups, both maybe in the real world or internally, or there's more friction involved when engaging in the NFT space, so they choose to be anonymous. And on first glance, you might see those as extreme polar opposites, but the more I looked into it and spoke to people who were anonymous, I came to realize that we're all kind of doing the same thing in a way, just two sides of the same coin is how I like to explain it. And so I wanted to sort of explore a way in which I can show that dichotomy between the two expressions, or ways in which we choose to express ourselves. So I developed this concept where it's sort of one sculpture that's digital and one sculpture that's physical, and over time the distance between the two of them becomes greater and greater as a physical piece will age or move around or have essentially lived experiences, while the digital will always remain as this like sort of perfect blueprint of what the initial design of the concept was. And to also emphasize this further dilemma almost, on one side of this face I have G-Money's CryptoPunk, because he's a collector of mine, so I reached out to ask if I could use his, because I think that's a great analogy for, or it is the epitome of what you can do with an anonymous brand beyond your own sort of form of identity. And on the other side of the face, I put a sort of abstracted version of myself, just as a, contrast against this anonymous brand. And, there's a bit more nuance to it, but I have a more in-depth artist statement that I'll be sharing where you can, read more about it if you want to really spend some time going deep. A lot of people have just been really impressed that I was able to pull off a physical sculpture of this size, and a lot of people really love the sort of illusion. I used this method called lenticular printing, or it's sort of a version of that I guess production style. I don't even know how I would explain it, but having two images on one sort of object by using some optical illusion stuff. People really like that. It's engaging to the viewer, and I think it also works both really well in physical, because you can walk around it and really engage with the piece, but also in VR, because you can just spin it and click around and also really have an interesting viewing experience. So people are really excited about it, but I'm also interested to see how people respond to the piece as they discover more about the narrative, because so far I've only released a few teasers. I'm not sure that individual creators will have an impact on the fashion industry as a whole, because it is one of the biggest industries in the world. But I think rather the individual creator no longer has to participate in the fashion industry. So I have always been really involved in fashion and style, and I've even taught myself how to make some clothes, and I've always had this sort of push and pull relationship with the fashion industry, because everybody knows it's very exploitative. It's one of the biggest polluters in the entire world, and fast fashion, and there's many things you can critique for the fashion industry. But through this metaverse and Web3, it has given me the agency to express myself through fashion and participate in, this form of dress beyond just this fashion cycle of going to fashion weeks, producing clothing, manufacturing wearable items, but rather using fashion really as a medium to express myself through the metaverse. And I think that the more accessible we make that element of it, where each individual has a choice and doesn't feel forced to participate in a specific industry the way that it has been created for us, will, in some way affect the fashion industry overall. But it will take some time, and it is, I would say, less on the individual and more on like the entire system. I'm not quite sure actually, because I feel like my personality and my identity and creativity have always sort of been at that in a space that fits really well with Amsterdam, and I'm very set on how I choose to be as a person, how I choose to express myself. So rather than finding a place and letting it shape me, I feel like I was able to find the place that best suited how I chose to be. And so in that way, I feel like I really enjoy my creative freedom and the balance, the work-life balance that is in Amsterdam, being a bit more European. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it changed how I am, but rather is just a much nicer, cohesive fit for me. I've noticed that there are, many new institutions and individuals coming into the NFT space. It's growing every day, and more time passes, and there's more distance between these original narratives that myself and a lot of these other very early and talented artists were creating for ourselves. And so having opportunities like this to really make sure that we can share our stories and maintain this, historic narrative that we really are empowered to be a part of, and make sure that people are aware of what came before, these larger institutions and the sort of Web 2 invasion in a way. But also I think a lot of artists like myself have a really unique perspective on just the world in general, and we have a lot to say beyond just making art. And a lot of the times the discourse online is not the best place to, have these more nuanced conversations and talk about the experiences or the inspirations that go into the art that we make. Even just with @username, I have to be very careful about the way I present it online, and also somewhat acknowledge the fact that most people probably won't even go and look at the artist statement. So having the opportunity to speak on broader topics like here today is definitely important for artists like myself. I really want to share my experience as a queer artist from, really early, when discussions of, gender identity and queerness in the space just really didn't exist, and how I've noticed that change throughout the last couple of years, and where I hope it will continue to grow in the future, and what I am hoping to do to help lead that conversation. Yeah, I recently had the chance to meet the Bea from Dada, and they always have something really, really mind-blowing to share, so I'm really excited to hear what they have to say.